in Shanghai, China with Sugeng Wijanto and with Tiyok Prasetyoadi, and they are here from Indonesia to talk about a new building with 111 floors, 638 meters that's going to start construction. And this is really kind of exciting because the great thing about being here in China with you is that previously it was very hard to get information about projects in Indonesia especially. And 15 years ago we were looking at the BDNI Tower. That's how recent, at least my knowledge is, as to what's happening in Indonesia with Supertall. Tell me about this project and when it's going to start construction and just and what it is. Go ahead and start.
Okay. Well, for this project, actually, we are working with some foreign consulting engineer. Let's say like architect working with Smallwood, and myself, structural, working with Tonton Tomasetti, and M&A is from Pekan, New Zealand. So this project is quite, I think it's quite landmark project in Indonesia. We will start this project hopefully in this year. At this moment, we are at the design development stage, and we are already to do the tender for the test file. And the permit, I think Pak Tiyok later on can mention, especially from the architect side.
I'm the architect of records for the project, working with the international team and also local team. But our company also responsible for the master planning or urban design. I mean, our sister company. So the project is actually being planned about 20 years ago. It was originally for 88 stories building, but then they integrate all the other buildings so they can have the FAR of the building to make a taller building, 111 stories, which began maybe about 2 years ago. So now it's at the planning submission stage, and it will be start constructing maybe in next year, as soon as end of next year. It's been a very exciting project for us because for Indonesia this is the first super tall building that's going to be built.
And it's going to be, if everything remains as you believe it will be, the 5th tallest building in the world. So, you know, we are talking considerable height here. And this is, there was one building in Indonesia that was over 1,000 feet, 300 meters, which is BDNI, which was an IMP building, which I guess was never completed. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, is the time ripe for a super tall in Indonesia? This is the first one. Is the timing right on this one, and why haven't we seen one before?
I think we admit that this is the one that we start with the new tall building design. However, we are fortunate that we can work with a foreign consultant engineer, so we can learn, and so that we don't have to experience the challenge or maybe mistake from the foreign consultant. So hopefully after this building, there are a lot of another tall, super tall buildings.
Yeah, if you ask about the timing, I think it's a little bit too late because Indonesia has the economic peak during the 70s and 80s up to the Asian crisis in 97. And that time we built more, sprawl, and that hurts in a city planning in city, because then a lot of people now live very far away from the city center, and CBD is quite low density. Even if you see there are a lot of high rise or tall buildings, but mostly the tall buildings are around, mostly now they built around 30 stories. It's also because the city planning doesn't allow it to go higher. So now we reach the economic boom again. So it is, I think, the right time to have more and more density in the CBD. So it has to be concentrated and well located and very well, accessible, because the major problem in Indonesian cities is infrastructure, including transportation and drainage and utility power, things like that. So we have to create more density in the city center. By that, also government has to invest more in their infrastructure, and it doesn't have to be necessary the highest building in the world every time they build, but it has to be, people start living in the city, living and working.
Various cultures have different ways or different attitudes towards super tall buildings. Some really adapt to them well and like them, and others are a little more hesitant. The mindset of the people of Indonesia, is this something they're going to like and take pride in, or what is the attitude towards super tall buildings in Indonesia?
Well, because we are the newcomer, and then the attitude is the important thing actually, especially for the workmanship. But we would like to learn from the foreign countries, especially China or United States. There are a lot of high-rise buildings, and at this moment in Indonesia, all code is actually adapted from US. So it's easy. We just learn from US, and then we can apply in Indonesia. Although it's quite difficult to control, especially on site for the workmanship, but we have to start. If not, we cannot start anymore.
Yeah, it's right. The culture, we have to change the culture. A lot of people now used to be not living in an apartment or a tall building or multi-story building. They used to live in a house in the suburbs. So, but when the transportation gets worse, they like to live in the city, and they're starting to have more and more apartment, 12, 20, 30 stories, even 50 stories apartment. So the culture of living in a tall building has gradually changed, but as we have a very large gap between the lowest and highest income and things like that, so it needs time to adapt culturally how they use the building, how do they use the facilities, the sophisticated super tall building, security, safety, and things like that.
It seems that in Asia, the tall buildings are coming in bunches, that once a country has them, or a city has them, that others will follow. And do you think others will follow in Indonesia?
When Signature Tower planning is granted, it will be followed by other, taller building than 30 or 40 stories. Now they have a plan to have 60 stories building, and we just discussed about PDNI project that is going to be continued with this 300 meters. So we expect to see not only 111 stories building, but maybe more of 70s, 60 stories, like around 300 meters.
So the average building height is coming up, is
yeah.
what we're talking about here.
Yep.
So you're kind of going to the next level. What do you think?
Well, actually, also to be for the government, also to be consider, especially Jakarta is also in the high seismic zone area, and then due to many recent earthquakes, large earthquakes, especially in southern of Java, the subduction and etc. So when you build a lot of high-rise buildings, you have to be careful with the seismic. And we have to do a performance-based design analysis like in the United States. So we can prove that the building is in the life safety or immediate occupancy after the earthquake. Because Indonesia, especially like Jakarta, the building is sit in the very soft soil. The below soil conditions alluvial deposit. And very soft, and probably we cannot find the rock up to 2,700 meters from the ground surface. So that's the important thing. If there are a lot of buildings in Jakarta, be careful that the engineer, especially, should be quite experienced and expertise to design the tall building. We don't want any after the earthquake, the building will tilt. And what happened with the client, the tenant, they don't want to go back to that building. That is the important we have to look consider.
What have you learned? What has Indonesia learned about seismic activity, about earthquakes with its mid-rise buildings, the existing buildings? Has everything worked, or have there been lessons learned from those?
Yes, I think at this moment the biggest earthquake that the engineer building a lot of collapse is in Padang, that's in 2009. But in Padang, the highest building probably only 8 stories. But from that area, we learn a lot. Most of the item that we have to consider and look is the workmanship. At that time, 1 week after the earthquake, I went there with the ERI from United States. We looked for several buildings, and mostly the building collapsed due to workmanship. So we have to be careful, site supervision on site, and also the material quality. That's to make the building become good in seismic.
Is that going to be an easy thing to get a handle on?
Not an easy thing, but all the engineers should be work together, especially the association and the government, to teach the not only the engineer, but also the unskilled labor on site. So all the attitude is the important thing.
Yeah, in Jakarta especially, Pak Sugeng was mentioning Padang, which is a bit far away from Jakarta. Jakarta is people attitude towards going back after the earthquake is okay. I mean, there hasn't been a major earthquake in Jakarta, but quite frequent here. Yeah, quite frequent. But there's no problem. Like they go back to the office. Earthquake happens. They know how to, But they know how to protect themselves. But this is a kind of thing that I mentioned earlier about social issues that people need to be educated about living in tall building, about how if disaster happens,